Okay, so chapter 2, Rise of the Jumbies. But today, chapter 2 is just one page. So I'll go ahead and start chapter 3 also. So yesterday we learned about our main character, Corinne. She lives on an island in the Caribbean and she has two best friends. And do you remember what would happen to them? Mr. Petch would be proud if you would know that that was a tsunami, an earthquake that caused a giant wave that came up onto the island. And we know that Corinne and her friends were safe, but her dad's fishing boat couldn't be found. So let's see what happens today. All right, chapter 2, an opening in the sea. Beneath the tangle of boats and nets, the ocean floor quivered. Sand rose up, muddying the water. Schools of fish were shaken out of the coral. Rocks covered in barnacles and layers of sediment dislodged and knocked against each other. As they tumbled, they opened hidden chasms like a bottle finally free of its cork. In the darkness of a newly opened chamber, a gnarled, shriveled-looking creature shifted and then shifted again, as if it was testing out its new space. Long, twig-thin fingers reached out from under the rocks and folded into the fissures of the stone above. The fingers pushed the stone, stretching the chasm wide like the jaws of a beast. Chapter 3, What the Sea Keeps. Corinne took a few steps back down the hill. Malik grabbed her hand. He looked her in the eyes and shook his head. Malik never said much, but they all understood him perfectly, most of the time. I know he told us to go home, Corinne said. She pleaded with her eyes. Malik pulled her to the yard. Buki stopped dead in his tracks before the front steps and frowned at the small wooden house. What if there's another one, he said. This house could come crashing down on our heads if we go inside. Do you think we would be better off in your cave? Corinne asked. All the time we lived in caves, nothing bad ever happened to us, Buki said. Malik went up to the veranda and looked in through the louver-shuttered windows. He gestured for Corinne and Buki to follow. Broken lanterns lay on the floor, but most everything else seemed to be okay. Corinne went inside and began picking up fallen objects. She used a kitchen towel to sop up the lantern oil and pick up the shattered glass in one swoop. Then she came to a broken lump of wax. It was a figure of her mother that she had made last All Hallows Eve. It had been broken once before. Her hand fluttered up to her necklace and wrapped around the stone her mother had given to her. She brought it to her lips to kiss, nicking herself on a crack. The stone in the necklace had broken too, but her father's wrapped the remaining pieces in leather straps so that Corinne could keep it close to her heart where she liked it. Malik picked up the other piece of Corinne's wax figure and held it against the one Corinne had. It's okay, Malik, she said. I can fix it again. She ran her finger along the broken edge. It was covered in a thin layer of black soot where the pieces had been stuck together the last time. Hello? You in there? Here, Uncle Hugo. The stairs creaked beneath the baker's weight as he jogged up the veranda. He looked relieved to see both boys on either side of Corinne. Flour puffed from his apron when he folded over to catch his breath. Did you feel that? He asked. We were in the water when it happened, Buki said. Hugo reached up, squeezed Buki's hand, and pulled Malik into a hug. Are you all right? He asked. Before he gave them a chance to respond, he added, And Pierre? Corinne's stomach flipped, but she said calmly, Papa was out on the boat, but he'll be here soon. The boys gave her a look that said they knew she wasn't quite telling the truth, but Hugo didn't notice. He walked with them back to the back of the house and opened the top of the Dutch door. When he saw the beach, he squeezed the boys even more tightly. Everyone got away, Corinne said. We were the last ones on the shore. Hugo touched Corinne's wet braids. Of course you were. The four of you really know how to find danger. Then he looked at the three of them and said, Wait, Drew wasn't with you? Corinne said quickly. The door opened and Pierre walked in, soaked to the skin, breathing heavily. His dreadlocked hair hung over his shoulders, dripping a puddle of water at his feet. Papa, Corinne said. She ran to Pierre and wrapped her arms around his neck. His large arms closed around her, and she felt calmer immediately. "I was so worried, Papa." Pierre smoothed the braids on her head. "You forget that your grandpère is king of the fish folk, and I have sea water in my veins. You and I are always safe on the sea." This was the game they played every morning before he set out to catch fish. But today Pierre didn't sound as certain as he usually did, and Corinne wasn't sure she believed it anymore. "Is the earthquake over, Papa?" she asked. Pierre nodded. "We didn't know what was happening at first. The tide started to pull us out. Everyone dropped their nets." He took a deep breath. "There's no use pulling against the tide. It always wins." "What about the boat?" Corinne asked. "I can fix it this time," he said with a wink. Corinne swallowed hard. She felt bad about what had happened to her father's last fishing boat when she had rowed it out to sea and it broke apart at the base of the cliff. "If everyone else is safe, we should go," Hugo said. He gestured for the boys to follow him, but as they reached the door, 3 fishermen came up the steps. "What is it?" Pierre asked. "A child is missing," Victor said. Corinne and the boys shared a horrified look. "Who?" Corinne asked. "It's Laurent," said Victor. "His mother said she saw him running toward the house, but he never made it." A chill went through Corinne. "I saw him too," she said. "He can't be far." She hurried to the door, ready to look for her friend. "Stay here, Corinne," Pierre said. "The beach is still dangerous. I will help them find him." "Where did you last see him?" Victor asked. "He was running past the pink house," Corinne said. "He was almost home." "I will search with you," Hugo said. He gave the boys a look that was both stern and loving, and the men left, closing the door behind them. Laurent was one of Corinne's oldest friends. Even though his mother had been trying to keep him away from her, he sometimes managed to sneak a quick swim or a race in the sand. Corinne burst out of the door and said, "He's a strong swimmer and a fast runner." Pierre came back and put a hand on her cheek. "That will give him a very good chance." He pushed her gently inside and waited until she had closed the door. "We can't just stand here," Corinne said. "Maybe you can't," Buki said, "but I can. You heard your father. It's dangerous down there." Malik crouched and took a pair of binoculars from under one of the chairs. He lifted them up with a grin. "We can help," Corinne said, "and we don't have to be on the beach to do it." They watched the searchers walking through mucky, ankle-deep water. One of them was Laurent's mother, Mrs. Duval. She had taken care of Corinne sometimes when Corinne was still too young to be home alone and her papa was out on the sea. But things had changed since Corinne had gone into the mahogany forest, and a Jumbie, the kind the grown-ups told stories about at night, had followed her out. Mrs. Duval's voice called out above the other searchers, "Laurent! Laurent!" It reminded Corinne of how long it had been since she had heard the sound of her own mother's voice. She could only remember the gentle tone of it and a few words. She tried to remember how her mother had said, "Corinne." It had come back once on a breeze, and it had filled her up and carried her like a sail on a boat. But her mama's voice dissipated just as gently, and she couldn't catch it again. Corinne squeezed the stone on her neck as if her mother's voice were inside, waiting to ooze out of the crack. But only Mrs. Duval's voice came to her. The search party had spread out. They walked the entire length of the beach in one direction, then back the other way, looking under debris as they went. The sea slowly returned to its normal place, but the water remained a yellowish brown. Corinne, Buki, and Malik took turns with the binoculars, searching until the sun dove beneath the waves and everything went dark. In the moonlight, the search party returned to their homes, and Hugo and Pierre climbed the hill alone. They entered quietly and shook their heads when Corinne and the boys came in from the backyard. Corinne went to the garden and picked 2 large glossy melangenes and brought them into the kitchen. "Are we eating?" Buki asked. She washed the purple fruit, sliced and seasoned them, and placed them on a tray in the oven as her papa and Hugo whispered together. Soon the house was filled with the earthy aroma of the melangene. They sat around a flickering oil lamp at the kitchen table and ate their dinner quietly, even Buki. That night, after Hugo and the boys had gone home, Corinne tossed in bed. She dreamt that a wave had pulled her into the sea, and as hard as she tried, she couldn't swim to the surface. Then there was a rumble beneath her. The surface of the sand scattered like spilled sugar, and rocks split apart. One of them moved as if something had pushed it away. Corinne awoke drenched in sweat, with the moonlight filtering through the window. The scar on her thigh, which looked like a crooked silver twig, hurt. Every time she rubbed its raised outline, she remembered the day she had gotten the cut, trying to hide from the white witch. The wound had reopened when she climbed the cliff to get her mama's stone necklace back. The memory of the night she had faced off against the Jumbie, who called herself Severine, came in flashes. Pieces of her father's broken yellow boat swirling in the sea beneath her, the shine of her blood against a rock, the crack of her mama's stone as she banged it open. And of course I'm looking at what a melangine is. Oh! So a melangine is an eggplant. That must be the French word for it. So, all know eggplants, they're purple. They look like that. So that's what she got to eat off the tree. Okay. Months earlier, Corinne had believed that Jumbies were only stories that the grown-ups told to make children afraid. Jumbies were too incredible to be real. Who would believe in a creature like the soy caliente, who could shed her skin and turn into a ball of fire, or the lagahoo with knife-sharp teeth and clanging chains, or worst of all, the Dowan with its small, strong body and backward-facing feet. And then there was Severine, who was unlike any of the Jumbies Corinne had heard of in stories. At first, with her beautifully wrapped hair and long green dress, she looked exactly like the other ladies in town. Then she turned out to be the strongest and most dangerous Jumbie of all. But was she strong enough to survive falling from a cliff and being crushed under the rocks that fell with her? Corinne grasped her mama's stone. The leather-wrapped pieces felt both soft and tough, like her father's fingers twined with her own. They comforted her, and she remembered that she was safe on land. She brought the stone to her lips. Severine was gone. Gone, 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 Corinne said softly until she began to fall asleep again. But a voice came to her on the wind. The sea doesn't keep anything, Corinne. Pretty good. So that's the end of chapter 3. So I wonder if the lady on the front is Severine, or if it's the new bad person. Who knows? All right, tomorrow, chapter 4, and I think 5. 4 is just one page. So we'll do 4 and 5 tomorrow. Pretty good so far.